They call them the nation's girls. But they call themselves the baddest. It's the ultimate contrast, polished versus the raw. Two groups, two blueprints, one era that redefined K-pop. In the mid-2000s, the South Korean music industry was searching for a female counterpart to the massive success of multi-member boy groups like Super Junior. SM Entertainment's answer was a 9-member ensemble trained to embody a specific type of high-gloss perfection that had never been seen on this scale. The debut of Girls' Generation, or SNSD, was on the 5th of August 2007 with their debut single, Into the New World. It served as a technical manifesto for the group's future, prioritizing vocal stability and complex group geometry over individual solo moments. SNSD visual concepts centered on a girl-next-door athletic aesthetic, featuring white uniforms and high-energy choreography that required absolute synchronization. Unlike the provocative or overly mature concepts of some groups at the time, SNSD leaned into a youthful, pure image that appealed to the broadest possible Korean demographic, targeting both teenage girls and the older demographic simultaneously. This intentional branding allowed them to capture the nation's girl group title almost by default, as no other agency possessed the resources or the pink aesthetic training to maintain a 9-person roster with such mechanical precision. The impact of this era was felt most strongly in the industry's awards circuit, where SNSD achieved their first music show win on M Countdown and won the Rookie of the Year title on major platforms like the Golden Disc Awards and Best New Female Group on Korean Entertainment Arts Awards. They ended 2007 as the definitive standard-bearers for the new generation, proving that a large-scale group could be financially viable despite the high overhead costs of housing and training 9 artists. However, this period of dominance was also marked by the infamous Black Ocean at the 2008 Dream concert, where rival fandoms cut their light sticks, leaving the girls to perform in silence. This event, intended to break their spirit, only served to harden the group's resolve and solidify a siege mentality within their fandom. The Sowons, creating a bond that would sustain them through a year of relative silence before their massive 2009 return. Following a short hiatus to recalibrate after the incident, SNSD returned with a release that would effectively end the debate over who owned the Korean music market. G arrived in early January 2009 and bypassed typical idol trends to become a genuine cultural phenomenon that redefined the sound of the second generation. The track was a masterclass in repetitive, infectious pop production, utilizing bubblegum synth-pop elements designed to be stuck in the listener's head after a single play. This was the moment SNSD transitioned from a successful idol group into a household name that transcended age, gender, and even national boundaries as the G fever began to leak into neighboring Japan and Southeast Asia. The visuals were genius. A mannequin concept featuring those iconic colorful skinny jeans. The trend was so explosive that specific denim shades sold out across South Korea in weeks. The choreography was simplified and focused on point choreography, meaning fans could easily replicate the GEE hand gestures and the crab dance leg movements. The impact of G was unprecedented, holding the #1 spot on KBS Music Bank for a record-breaking 9 consecutive weeks. This single solidified their grip on the domestic market so firmly that they were officially dubbed the nation's girl group by major news outlets, a title that became inseparable from their brand. They won the Digital Daesang at the Golden Disc Awards, marking their first major grand prize and signaling that girl groups could finally compete with the digital power of soloists and boy bands. By mid-2009, It seemed SNSD had reached a ceiling where no other group could challenge their polished feminine blueprint, as the industry scrambled to produce clones of their innocent and bright concept. But what happens next completely flips the game, as a new force was rising in the training room of YG Entertainment, one that viewed perfection as a cage rather than a goal. As SNSD G was finally cooling off the charts, YG Entertainment prepared a debut that was designed to be the antithesis of everything SM Entertainment had built. 2NE1, consisting of Bomb, Dara, CL, and Minzy, did not aim for the Girl Next Door or Nations labels. They were marketed as the female Big Bang, focusing on hip-hop, street fashion, and a radical rejection of traditional beauty standards that emphasized vulnerability. Their debut single, Fire, was released with two separate music videos, a space version and a street version, signaling their versatility and an experimental edge that leaned into the bad girl archetype. The visual concept was a shock to a public accustomed to the pink aesthetic and uniform styling of SNSD. 2NE1 wore neon leggings, gravity-defying hairstyles, and aggressive streetwear that felt more New York than Seoul, signaling a global ambition from day one. Their choreography was less about synchronization and more about individual swag and stage presence. CL, the group's leader, embodied a fierce, commanding persona that gave birth to the modern girl crush movement, proving female idols could command a stage through raw power rather than sweetness. The impact was immediate and explosive, as Fire achieved a certified all-kill on digital charts within days of its release, proving that the digital native youth of Korea were hungry for something edgier. Despite being rookies, 2NE1 took home the Song of the Year at the Mnet Asian Music Awards for their follow-up hit, I Don't Care, a feat almost unheard of for a group in their debut year, as well as Best Female Rookie Award. This created the first true split in the second generation. You were either a fan of the polished, synchronized perfection of SNSD or the individualistic, rebellious charisma of 2NE1. The two-pillar system of K-pop had officially been established, forcing every agency to choose which of these two divergent paths they would follow. By 2010, the rivalry had moved beyond simple chart battles and into a full-scale war of global expansion and conceptual evolution. SNSD continued to double down on their physical sales dominance, releasing O and Run Devil Run, which showed a slightly darker side of their concept that hinted at a shift from girls to women. Meanwhile, 2NE1 released their first full-length album, 2NE1, which featured 3 simultaneous title tracks: Can't Nobody, Go Away, and Clap Your Hands. A high-risk strategy that paid off by occupying the top 3 spots on the charts simultaneously. This period represented the absolute peak of the second generation, where both groups with opposite concept were operating at a level of production and popularity that left the rest of the industry in their shadow, creating a duopoly of influence. SNSD O era saw them embracing a cheerleader concept that further cemented their fandom power, leading to them becoming the only girl group in history to win an Album of the Year at the Golden Disc Awards. This was a critical milestone, as physical album awards were traditionally reserved for boy groups with massive female fan bases. SNSD win proved that a girl group could command the same level of obsessive, buying power loyalty. 2NE1 countered this in 2011 with I Am the Best, a track that arguably became the most iconic K-pop song of the decade globally. bridging the gap between idol music and the Western EDM pop explosion. The song's heavy electronic beat and "I Am the Best" refrain became a global anthem of empowerment, winning them another Song of the Year and positioning them as the faces of K-pop's international fashion and club scene. The distinction between the two groups was now measurable by their trophy cabinets and their specific circle of influence. SNSD was the album queen, winning on the strength of their loyal, massive fan base and a national girl group brand. 2NE1 was the digital queen, winning on the strength of public trends, international viral impact, and high fashion rebellion. This era proved that K-pop was large enough for both blueprints to coexist, but the media and the fans were constantly looking for the moment they would finally collide directly on the same week. We'll get to that in a moment, but first, we have to look at the tension building toward 2014, when the two titans finally made a move at the same time. The tension that had been simmering for 5 years finally boiled over in February 2014 in what is still remembered as the most legendary comeback war in history, a moment where the industry's two most powerful agencies engaged in a direct game of chicken. SM Entertainment announced SNSD Mr. would be released in late February, signaling a high-fashion, mature rebrand for the group. In a move that shocked the industry, YG Entertainment rescheduled 2NE1's Crush album to drop on the exact same week, explicitly timing it to coincide with SNSD release. This was a deliberate Titans clash orchestrated to determine which concept philosophy, either perfection or rebellion, would reign supreme at the end of the second generation. SNSD Mr. visual concept was a radical departure from their previous brightly colored themes, featuring a hospital chic aesthetic with suits that emphasized class over cuteness. However, the release was famously plagued by a technical glitch that corrupted their music video footage, forcing reshoots under extreme pressure. 2NE1's Crush featured the title track "Come Back Home," which blended reggae, acoustic, and trap, accompanied by a high-budget sci-fi music video that explored themes of a virtual reality dystopia. The contrast was stark and intentional. While SNSD was refined, professional, and classy, representing the ultimate evolution of the traditional idol, 2NE1 was experimental, futuristic, and loud, representing the vanguard of a global musical movement. The results of the war were a perfect tie that reflected their respective strengths, leaving both fandoms to claim victory. SNSD dominated the music shows, taking home 9 trophies from Mr. and proving that their domestic popularity and nation status remained untouched. However, 2NE1's Crush debuted at number 61 on the Billboard 200, breaking the record for the highest charting K-pop album in US history at the time, and proving that the Girl Crush blueprint was the primary strategy for Western expansion. This showdown was the final proof that the industry had two distinct paths to victory, meaning the domestic stability of the SM model and the global volatility of the YG model. It was no longer about who was better, but about which metric of success you valued more in an increasingly globalized industry. After the dust of 2014 settled, the rivalry shifted from a head-to-head battle into 2 separate legendary victory laps. No longer needing to prove who was on top, both groups spent their veteran years pushing their signature concepts to the absolute limit. In 2015, Girls' Generation celebrated their longevity with the Lionheart era, leaning into a glamorous, retro classic aesthetic that leaned even further into their nation's girl group status. Meanwhile, 2NE1's final chapter was defined by a legendary unannounced reunion at the 2015 Mnet Asian Music Awards. It remains one of the most watched moments in K-pop history, proving that even without a new album, their girl crush energy could still command the entire industry's attention. As they moved toward their 10th anniversaries, the contrast remained stark. SNSD released Holiday Night in 2017, a vibrant celebration of their decade-long bond with their fandom. While 2NE1's final gift on the same year, Goodbye, was a raw, emotional ballad that topped the Billboard World Digital Songs chart. Even at the end, their successes were polar opposites. SNSD thrived on the joy of staying together as Korea's favorite daughters, while 2NE1 thrived on the legacy of being the rebellious icons who changed the world. The rivalry between Girls' Generation and 2NE1 was never truly about who would be the last group standing, though the fan wars of the time would suggest otherwise. Instead, it was a necessary, healthy conflict that defined the boundaries of the K-pop industry for the decades that followed, creating the two pillars that every trainee still studies today. SNSD proved that perfection, synchronization, and public relatability could build a national monument, making a group so ingrained in the cultural fabric that they become synonymous with the country's image. 2NE1 proved that individuality, rebellion, and a girl crush edge could shatter borders, proving that being different was a more powerful global currency than being perfect. Today, you can see the DNA of this rivalry in every generation that followed. It was first perfected in the third generation, where TWICE picked up the SNSD mantle to become the new nation's girl group through bright, synchronized perfection. While Blackpink took the 2NE1's blueprint of hip-hop and girl crush and scaled it into a global phenomenon. But the true testament to these two groups' impact is that it didn't stop there. When you watch the polished, high-fashion concepts and the effortless public appeal of IVE or New Jeans, you are seeing the direct evolution of the SNSD blueprint, pursuit of the nation's heart through curated excellence. And in the aggressive, self-assured performances and the trap-heavy soundscapes of Les Seraphim or Baby Monster, you are seeing the legacy of 2NE1, the power of the rebel archetype. This two group fought to create a world where a girl group could be anything they wanted to be, from the girl next door to the global icon. The story of these two groups is the story of K-pop itself. A constant, beautiful balance between the pink and the black, the generation, and the evolution.